However, our warnings and initiatives did not receive a clear response. I emphasize, and there should be no doubt about this, Russia is capable of responding to any existing and newly emerging threats. Respond not with words, but through the application of military technical measures. An example of this is our decision to abandon the unilateral moratorium on the deployment of ground-based intermediate and shorter-range missiles. This was a forced step dictated by the necessity to adequately respond to programs for deploying similar weapons of American and other Western production in Europe and the Asia-Pacific region, which directly threaten Russia's security. Our plans to strengthen the country's defense capability are built considering the changing global situation, implemented fully and on time. Good day, esteemed colleagues. Today we have several issues, including matters of migration policy. But I would like to start today with another issue, an issue that is of exceptionally important and fundamental significance for the protection of our national interest, the sovereignty of Russia, for ensuring international security as a whole without any exaggeration. I mean, the situation in the field of strategic instability, unfortunately, it continues to deteriorate, caused by the combined impact of a number of factors, specifically negative ones, provoking the escalation of existing and the emergence of new strategic risks. As a result of previously undertaken quite destructive steps by Western countries, the foundation of constructive relations and practical cooperation between nuclear-armed states was significantly undermined. The foundations for dialogue in relevant bilateral and multilateral formats have been undermined. Step by step, the system of Soviet American and Russian American agreements on missile, nuclear and strategic defensive arms control has been almost completely dismantled. The system worked both to stabilize the situation between the states possessing the two largest nuclear arsenals and, in general, to strengthen global security. I will repeat again, we have repeatedly spoken about the reasons and possible consequences of this state of affairs. Multiple problems accumulated in this strategic sphere since the beginning of the 21st century are linked to the West's destructive actions, their destabilizing doctrinal concepts and military technical programs aimed at undermining global parity to achieve an attempt to achieve absolute overwhelming superiority. We consistently and thoroughly focus on these issues. We criticize this position. Not only did we emphasize the extreme danger of further degradation of the situation, but we also repeatedly put forward specific ideas for its joint management. However, our warnings and initiatives did not receive a clear response. I emphasize, and there should be no doubt about this, Russia is capable of responding to any existing and newly emerging threats. Respond not with words, but through the application of military technical measures. An example of this is our decision to abandon the unilateral moratorium on the deployment of ground-based intermediate and shorter-range missiles. This was a forced step dictated by the necessity to adequately respond to programs for deploying similar weapons of American and other Western production in Europe and the Asia-Pacific region, which directly threaten Russia's security. Our plans to strengthen the country's defense capability are built considering the changing global situation, implemented fully and on time. We are confident in the reliability and effectiveness of our national deterrent forces, but at the same time, we are not interested in further escalating tensions and fueling an arms race. Russia has always proceeded from the preference and priority of political and diplomatic methods for maintaining international peace based on the principles of equality, indivisibility of security, and mutual consideration of interests. I would like to remind you that the last significant political diplomatic achievement in the field of strategic stability was the conclusion of the Russian-American Treaty on Strategic Offensive Arms in 2010. However, subsequently, due to the extremely hostile policy of the Biden administration, by violating the basic provisions on which this treaty was based, its full implementation was suspended in the year 2023. Nevertheless, both sides declared their intention to voluntarily continue adhering to the central quantitative limits of the Strategic Offensive Arms Treaty until the end of its life cycle. Thus, for almost 15 years, this agreement has continued to play a significant positive role in maintaining the balance of power and certainty in the field of strategic offensive arms. The term of the New START Treaty expires on the 5th of February 2026, which means the imminent disappearance of the last international agreement on direct limitations on missile nuclear capabilities. A complete rejection of the legacy of this agreement would be, from many perspectives, a mistaken and short-sighted step, which, in our opinion, would also negatively impact the objectives of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In order not to provoke a further strategic arms race, to ensure an acceptable level of predictability and restraint, we consider it justified to try to maintain the status quo established by the New START at the current rather turbulent stage. Therefore, Russia is ready, after February 5, 2026, to continue for 1 year adhering to the central quantitative limits of the New START Treaty. Subsequently, based on the analysis of the situation, we will make a certain decision regarding the further maintenance of these voluntary self-limitations. We believe that this measure will only be viable if the United States acts similarly and does not take steps that undermine or disrupt the existing balance of deterrence capabilities. In this regard, I ask the relevant agencies to continue closely monitoring the corresponding activities of the American side, primarily concerning the strategic offensive arms arsenal. Particular attention should also be paid to the plans for expanding the strategic components of the United States missile defense system, including preparations for deploying interceptors in space. We will proceed from the fact that the practical implementation of such destabilizing actions can nullify our efforts to maintain the status quo in the field of strategic offensive arms. We will respond accordingly. I believe that the implementation of the Russian initiative could make a significant contribution to creating an atmosphere conducive to a substantive strategic dialogue with the United States of America. Naturally, when creating conditions for its full-scale resumption and taking into account the entire range of efforts to normalize bilateral relations, eliminate fundamental contradictions in the field of security. Let's move on to the current agenda. The floor is given to Sergei Viktorovich Lavrov and Andrei Romanovich Belousov.